All right, welcome everybody. I am joined today by Star Wars CCG collecting legend and also playing legend, Andy, and we're here to talk about cubes. What is a cube? How do you build a cube? What does a good cube look like? Why this is a good format for beginners? And Andy has built more than one cube. So let me turn it over to Andy. Just introduce yourself, how you got into this hobby, and then we can start getting into some of the nitty gritty of cube talk.
Yeah, sure. Definitely. Thanks for having me on. Excited to be here and talking about cube format near and dear to my heart. I love cubing. It's probably my favorite way to play any collectible card game, no matter which game it is. I just find the draft process and the actual building of a cube to be really interesting. So excited for the conversation we're going to have here. As far as myself, my name's Andy Talaga. Most recently, I'm been pretty much just a collector of the game, but my history with Star Wars CCG goes back quite a number of years. I started with Premiere in 1995, Christmas of 95, played all the way through to the very end of Decipher losing the license, stepped away for quite a number of years, really just focused in on Magic during that time. I've been playing Magic since 94. And then right around beginning of pandemic, maybe about June or so of 2002, so a little bit after that started, really jumped back into Star Wars CCG. Initially, it was really just to get one of each set, but really spiraled out of control over the last like 2 years.
Andy, I get it. Like, you're talking to a guy who bought a box of Thebe Palace this week, and I'm like, what am I doing? But I, this has been a really fun hobby, and I think our sort of narratives are similar. That I also came back during COVID, and I was a player. I was one of those more like the annoying kid players in the 90s. So I always just got like beat very resoundingly by like the college kids. But this game was, is an immense source of nostalgia for me, and it's fun to be kind of back into it and making these videos.
Same.
Yeah, so let's talk cubes. So let's start with the very kind of like basics. What is a cube? Why should I build one? How do you build one? So
Sure.
why does it work?
Cube is, for lack of a better term, a draft simulator. So for anybody who's not really familiar with what drafting is usually you get 3 packs of 15 cards. You probably buy them from a store and sit down and play, but nobody really selling sealed packs of Star Wars CCG at your local game store. So a cube serves as kind of this intermediate filler where you have a subset of cards and you create packs of cards, 15 cards at a time. And you're going to take a card out of your pack and pass it to your left. You presumably would have about 8 people sitting around a table doing this. So each person's passing to their left. You're taking one card out of each pack. After all 15 cards are picked out of the first pack, you open up your second pack, take a card, pass to the right. You continue to do that until you get to the third pack, switch back to the left. At the end, you have picked 45 different cards out of all of the packs, and then you proceed to build a deck and play. So with a cube, like I said, you're not really buying sealed packs at a local game store, and Star Wars comes at a time in CCG history where drafting wasn't really a thing. So it'd be really difficult to draft Star Wars by just opening up sealed packs. Like, you get 3 packs of Dagobah. It's probably the worst experience of your life. A bunch of vine snakes versus Minox floating
Yeah,
around.
I feel like they experimented this a little bit with the official tournament sealed decks, which, are mostly just remarkable for the boxes. But I think they tried, it didn't really work.
Yeah, that was a little bit more geared towards sealed, which has a lot of similarities to drafting in the deck construction and play aspect, because you're basically playing limited versus real constructed. So But Star Wars really suffers from not having a real draft format. So this kind of fills that gap. And what a cube is it's going to be a subset of cards that you choose. You have to kind of think about how many people are going to really be playing your cube. So, because you need to have enough cards in the cube to hold an actual draft. So, ideally you want to have 8 players, because tournament style, that'll be about 4 rounds and get you to one person that's undefeated. But to get 8 people together and actually draft a Star Wars CCG cube and have people know what's going on, as well as just get 8 people together in general, is probably pretty difficult. But, if each player is going to get 45 cards, if you had 8 people, it's 360 cards. Now, you're going to be trying to get roughly the best 360 cards that you can. You can theme your cube different ways. You could do, a lower powered cube where it's a bunch of non-unique aliens. You could do a higher powered level cube where it's all EPPs and Luke Skywalker Jedi Knights running around everywhere. But you need about 360 cards. And then, for me, I really want to focus it on battling and interacting. Star Wars is pretty famous for having a lot of negative play experience kind of strategies, which I don't particularly find fun. I want to have, Obi and Luke fighting Vader and Tarkin at the cantina all day. That's what's fun about Star Wars for me. So I try to focus my cube on more like a means and toys strategy. And then
I think you raise a really good point there. When you think about constructing a cube, you can make this card pool to be sort of optimal for different, like you want your draft to go a certain way and to be a little more interesting and interactive. You just don't include pod racing, right? Or don't include,
don't
Senate
include the Senate, don't include,
inserts.
numbers and
like,
million surprise assaults. Cube by nature, historically, it comes out of Magic. And that's where you'll find a lot more resources about cubing and cube construction. Now you have to read it through the lens of Star Wars CCG, but historically cubes are singleton in nature. So there's only one copy of any card. So you're going to have 360 unique cards. There's not really going to be overlap. Now in Star Wars, that eliminates certain strategies like non-unique alien strategies and stuff. So again, you can kind of curate it and develop your cube however you enjoy and really what your play group is going to enjoy. So for me, I like high powered, a lot of interaction. So mine's basically just a means and toys deck. It's all the best cards. Currently I do Premiere through, or I guess Decipher card only. It's everything Premiere through Feed Palace Reflections 3. But you can build it.
I wanted to describe. So one of the reasons I wanted to have this conversation is I built my own cube and I've been using it to sort of teach my Magic the Gathering friends, sort of try converting them how to play. And I have found that it's just generally a positive experience they're having, right? Because they're drafting a Darth Maul, right? And they're drafting Darth Vader, whatever. And it feels much more rewarding and interactive, and it's not like they need to worry about these really obscure objectives and like strange win conditions.
Sure.
So I think it's a really good format for beginners if you can just put in the 15 to 20 hours of building it. So maybe we can kind of get a little bit into, how do you build a cube? Like what is sort of like your strategy? I think you got into a little bit, but high power, low power. What do you think is a really good, let's say, beginner cube? You want to build a cube so that you can just play with some buddies.
Sure.
What do you think is your approach there?
So realistically, I think what you're going to look at is the kind of person who they found their cards in their garage or their attic or their closet or their parents' house or whatever. And it's probably a box of white bordered Premiere through Jabba's palace, right? and telling somebody that they should go build a Premier through Theed Palace with, a million EPPs and ultra rares and all the Coruscant combo cards and stuff is not really feasible, because I don't think that person's going to want to drop $2,500 just to build one to draft it 2 times a year, right? So I think a good starting point is going to be, within that lens, Premier through probably Special Edition, Premier through Endor. A lot of people are going to say default to Premier through Death Star 2, but Death Star 2, you start getting into a lot more high powered. That's where you start seeing a lot more power creep come into Star Wars CCG. And, there are some cards that are just quite expensive in that set. So somewhere in the before Reflections 2 for sure, era of Decipher cards, or go the virtual card route. There's a lot of resources on StarWarsCCG.org in the forums. There's actually a sub forum dedicated to just Cube. So if you're trying to build, I would actually head over to that area first. If you go into the forums, it's under Star Wars CCG resources, and then there's a sub forum that's all about cubing. There's a lot of people who post different lists up there that you can look at for inspiration, but virtual cards by almost necessity are really just free, right? It's just whatever it costs you to print them out.
I'll include a link to that in the video description, by the way, for folks listening. So I'll include a link.
Sure. So if you're really starting out with cubing, I would go there first, and just poke around at different lists and see what people have put in, see what the official PC cube looks like. Going with virtual cards is going to probably be the most cost-effective version. Obviously, if you're going to go play in a tournament, you need to have the correct backing card for the virtual cards. If you're sitting around kitchen table playing, you and 4 other gaming buddies that mostly play Magic, you could probably slide a slip over any card. It makes it pretty cost effective to do.
Yeah, so that actually reminds me. So I have played Magic in a cube, and I think one of the Magic just plays so well in the cube format. It feels very natural, right?
Sure.
Because you have the 5 colors, and you're sort of, what is your strategy based on what you want to go. And with Star Wars, when I was building my cube, I included sort of a 15 card starter pack, right, which had the locations, some starting effects, starting interrupts, sort of like and I would encourage people to do that as well. Like, as you draft, only draft 45 cards and have this 15 card starter pack, or just something that they can, have the basic locations, and that way they're not drafting a deck that only has 2 planets or something in it, right?
Yeah, and I do that with my cube as well. If you're sitting down with either people who you're teaching from other games, or people who are going to try and game, quote unquote, game the system of cubing, you could just not draft a location, right? And then you can't play. Star Wars has a specific requirement to play the game, is that you must have at least 1 location in your deck. So to avoid that, yes, I have a freebie pack. So my main cube plays on a couple of different planets. So Hoth, Tatooine, Endor, Cloud City. And so I give you the main system, Bespin, and the docking bay. Tatooine, docking bay 94. Hoth, Echo docking bay, etc. Right? And then a couple of other random locations that are going to be keyed to certain things that will be themed to the cube. So Dark Side gets and Jabba's Palace Audience Chamber. Light Side gets a 4th marker, so that you could draft the main power generators and actually play it. You could draft a Scum and Villainy deck and actually have a place to put Scum and Villainy down, that type of stuff. As well as a prepared defenses heading for the medical frigate, and then 3 very generic effects that are really good. So Imperial Rest Order, mobilization points, and combat response or combat
battle
whichever
plan,
one
maybe.
shows the pilot and gets the ship.
Oh yeah.
And then the counterparts for light side, same thing. So you get 15 cards, and then you'll draft 45. You'll get these 15 cards. So you get 60 cards. I actually house rule it that you would build a 45 card deck rather than a 40 card deck, which is officially what you would build on for Star Wars CCG Limited. You present a 40 card deck. But with 45 cards, that gives you a starting location, a starting interrupt, and 3 effects. And then you can actually present a 40 card deck, which I think makes a lot of sense.
I think that's nice. And I think that's one of the things when folks are thinking about making cubes is just to be a little flexible with yourself, right? Like, building, you don't have to have like 60 cards. I mean, 60 cards is obviously a full legal deck, but with all this stuff, these are alternative play formats. Be creative, like create your own house rules, and when you draft, getting into like the actual draft format, I always did Winston drafts in Magic, which I don't think really work in this format for Star Wars. I think you need to kind of go with everybody has 15 cards, they're taking one and passing it around.
Sure.
So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of different ways you can scale drafting. It's probably hard to get 6 or 8 players together at a time. You might be able to do it around the holidays or something. A bunch of people are home.
Yeah.
You play, but if it's Wednesday night on March, 15th, whatever, like it's probably hard. So most of the time you're going to have 2, 3, maybe 4 people that are going to be playing. So there's a number of different draft formats. You could do Winston drafting, which, there's a lot of resources about how to Winston draft. But basically you're looking at the top card and choosing piles of cards that you get like one stack of cards. You flip over one card. You can choose to take that card. If you don't, you put a card face down in that pile and then get a different card, and you can build different piles, and it makes it interesting how you're going to draft it. But I would actually, if you're going to only have 2 players, I would say go with a smaller sized cube, 135 cards, and then do a grid draft, which a grid draft is a 3x3. So it's 3 across, 3 down. So it's 9 cards, and you can either take a row or a column. So if you're first, the cards get flipped face up, right? So if we're drafting against each other, if I'm the first player, I take a row or a column. I get 3 cards. Your turn, you now have presented with 6 cards. You can still take a row or a column. One may be 3, one may be 2, depending on what you're taking. And then you would remove the other 3 or 4 cards, flip over a new set of 9 cards, and we would alternate doing that. You'll end up with about 40 to 42 cards, which is close enough to a 45 card deck. And then you would build. So that's a great way to do just one-on-one drafting.
So with that, so whenever you draft, you're drafting, 40-ish cards plus the 15 that you're starting with. So you're building a deck with, let's say, close to 60. You're building a 40 card deck with the 60 cards. You're not including every single card that you drafted in it.
Correct. And, in my free packs, 11 of the cards are locations. So you're not going to play 11 locations. So actually a lot of the cards you're leaving out are freebie locations. Probably you might take one system and one docking bay or 2 docking bays or something like that, and you're going to bench 9 cards out of your freebie pack. So you are pretty much going to be playing most of the cards you do draft. But if you're going to go heavy aliens, let's say with a scum and villainy deck that you've drafted, and you have a bunch of random Imperials, you might throw an extra location or something in that you draft, or keep some of those cards on the side because they're going to not mesh well with how you've drafted. But you can kind of do lots of different types of drafting depending on how many people are actually going to be playing, which really comes into a bigger discussion about how big or small you should make a cube. How many cards you should decide to put in. Personally, I think 540 cards is the correct number, because 540 is like the most perfect way to divide between 2 through 12 players. And you can do all sorts of different drafts. The only problem is, like, if I'm building a high powered cube with not a lot of, with all being singleton, there's probably only about 400 or maybe 415 cards that are actually playable per side. Everything else is pretty much garbage. So it's really, really, really difficult to find 500 playable cards per side in Star Wars.
That is definitely, as I've gotten back into the hobby, that is something that, going through a lot of the older sets, I'm like, man, most of Premiere is garbage.
Pretty much all the cards are terrible except for a few.
Yeah, like maybe 15 cards. Like, it's like the mains, and then like traffic control, and reactor, whatever it's called, Imperial barrier, rebel barrier, etc. But most of it's bad.
Yeah, so it is hard to do it with to get to 540. At that point, you probably have to break singleton, which can be good or bad depending on how you want to do it. But my actual cube, because I can't find 540 cards that I would actually want to put into a draft, is 360. I don't ever anticipate having 8 actual people playing.
So is this 360 a side or 360?
360 cards per side. So okay. I guess that can lead into a how to actually draft a cube discussion.
Yeah, I think this is a kind of a good question, because I think in Magic, right, you're doing it because there's Star Wars is unique, and I think if it was launched later in CCG history, it would have not been like 2 different colored backs. I think that Decipher maybe like realized that mistake, and they corrected in Lord of the Rings with different indicators for like culture or
Sure.
But they did it, and so that means you'd need to have 2 drafts, I think.
Right. So there's actually a couple of different ways that you could approach this. Let's just say hypothetically, in a perfect world, you do have 8 people that sit down. You could do 1 draft. You draft light side first. You do a full draft, then you do a full draft on dark side, and then you go build 2 decks and you play. That's going to take a longer time. Some people really enjoy drafting and deck building more than playing. Some people really enjoy playing more and just want to get into it. I think that one requires you to feel out your play group a little bit more. The other option you could do, which for me is hard because I sleeve each side in different colors, but if you're not going to go that route, you could, if everything's sleeved in the same color, you could shuffle all of the cards together and create packs that have both light side and dark side cards in them. So then when you get in, which is, adds another layer of complexity to the draft, because you could, open up a pack and it's like, well, which one do I want to take? Do I want to take Boba Fett Bounty Hunter, or do I want to take EPP Luke? Okay, well, whichever one I take, I'm passing the other one, and I'm going to send a signal to the person to my left that, hey, take EPP Luke, right? But later on in that type of a draft, you may have been drafting a lot more light side cards and need dark side cards, right? Because you won't be able to build a full deck. So you, as the person organizing a draft, need to be aware of having more types of freebie cards than maybe a 15 card pack. But also then if you're drafting and you're like, I've overdrafted light side cards, I need dark side cards, and you get a pack that's, an EPP Luke, you're like, man, all right, I'm taking this one, passing the rest. And like, so it can be more mentally taxing on how to draft like that. But Yeah, basically you're going to do 2 drafts, build 2 decks, and play. There's not
Yeah.
really a way around it. You could do, I dubbed it war games, which is basically everybody drafts dark side, everybody drafts light side, and you orient the cards to facing you. So, like, if I draft a forest clearing, indoor forest clearing, I'm going to play it and I'm going to have the dark side icons facing to me because it has the little red dot to indicate which side it is. And then my opponent will just activate off of light side's force icons and play to the light side.
Though that's
And
kind
you
of
can just
fun.
play dark side versus dark side or light side versus light side. You get
I
into
like
some
these just sort
weird.
of like alternative ideas on how to play this, and I think one of the things that I've seen is within these freebies, including sort of objective modules, right? So you have
Do that too.
20 cards that are just gimmies or 15 cards that are gimmies for a nice hidden base deck, and you can kind of draft space stuff based on the fact that they're running hidden base
Yeah,
or whatever objective.
so I do that too. I actually put a little like sticker on the inside of the sleeve of specific cards in my cube. If we're not going to draft an objective module, it's just the regular card. The sticker doesn't do anything, but the sticker is key to one of the 20 cards in the objective module that is the same card. So, like, for example, if we were doing hidden base, maybe rendezvous point has, so that the objective is not in the draft cube,
Mm-hmm.
but rendezvous point is. There's a sticker on rendezvous point, and then there's a sticker on the rendezvous point in the objectives module. And then when you draft, you draft a card with a sticker at the end of the draft. When you normally would get your freebie pack, when you're going to sit down to deck build, you can once per draft essentially trade in your stickered card that you drafted to get the objective module, and then you would be able to build a deck. So you'd end up with 64 cards out of your draft. If you don't draft one of the stickered cards, you still would just get a freebie pack in that case. So there's a lot of advantage to drafting stickered cards.
Yeah, I like the idea. I need to. I've been meaning to. So I have a cube. I've actually played it quite a bit because it's just a great way to play with friends. They can kind of mess around in Endor. And the other thing is, with the freebie pack, you can make it very thematic and rewarding for the typical Star Wars fan, right? Like, ATs on Endor or on Hoth or Endor is fun, right? Like that is interesting and fun, and it reminds people of the movies, and that's essentially what this game is, right? You're creating like mini clips, mini stories from this universe. So that's one of the things I really like about the cube as well, is it can really focus on the interesting points of the universe and not just like some weird crap you're doing of like
Yeah,
operating
and
on like fishing.
I actually did that. I have like 4 or 5 cubes built of different sizes, different ideas behind them. My main cube, like I said, is basically tournament level, Decipher era, mains and toys style decks, all the best cards, all the best interrupts, all the best characters battling each other out. None of those really dumb negative play experience cards. But one of the cubes that I recently built was 300 cards, only aliens and droids, all on Tatooine, no space, nothing. So it's just going to be battling it out against each other. I actually borrowed a couple of ideas from different Magic formats. There's a format in Magic called Battle Box, which in Magic you would have you would get like a random assortment of cards from effectively a cube, and then on the side you would have the 5 basic lands and 5 like lower powered dual lands. So like maybe lands that like dual lands that come into play tapped or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
right? And once per turn, you can choose one of the lands from outside the game and you can play it. So it kind of fixes like mana screw in Magic. What took that idea to Star Wars, took all the locations out of this cube. So there's no locations that you can draft, and all the locations get put to the side. They're all the like kind of bad Tatooine locations. And then you do get a couple of different, there's 3 different starting locations that you could get. It's like Cantina, I don't know, Mos Eisley, and something else. I forget which ones. And then probably the most popular Magic format is Commander these days, right? And so I took most aliens are pretty low power level. Let's put it that way. And I specifically targeted kind of like lower power level. So there's no like Mara Jade or, you know, somebody like that could just like dominate a game of like where, like I went in with the idea that something like Prophetess or Lisa Serlin from like Premier is going to be a good card in this format because they have like ability 3 or ability 4 and can draw destiny by themselves. And then I took like a couple of little bit better aliens like Jabba from Special Edition and stuff, and I made them like a commander. So at the start of the game, you get a random starting location, a random starting commander. All the other locations are put outside of the game. You can play 1 location per turn, and then it's designed to be, you take the 300 cards, shuffle them up, and it's supposed to be 3-on-3 because there's a light side and a dark side. So 3 light side players, 3 dark side players, and you basically play team trios. So best of 3. So you're trying to win.
I really like that. I mean, I just like these different ways of taking this game and kind of reimagining it. I was also thinking as you were talking when you said you've built 5 cubes. I'm guessing if you had to put yourself on the spectrum of like people who like to build decks versus people who like to play the game, you might be more on like the deck building camp. Is that kind of where you're at?
These days, I probably much prefer deck building. Card theory, I don't really have a ton of time to play. I've been playing in the Premier, A New Hope Retro League.
Yeah, me too. I'm getting smoked. I am 1-3 right now.
I've been smoking people. I'm 3-1 and lost my last game to a fluke, essentially. But yeah, you know, so, and I enjoyed playing the game. I mean, I traveled for tournaments all the time for Star Wars, you know, Origins, Gen Con, Dragon Con, regionals, tournaments up in New York, DC, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, because I'm from the Philly area. I mean, we played in tournaments 4 times a month here in Philly for years. So I was definitely a tournament player. And then that carried over into Magic. I mean, I PTQs, Pro Tour, Grand Prix, you know, I played on all those. Traveled to 4 continents to play at different Grand Prix, chasing pro points and stuff. So, you know, I was definitely a tournament player. I just don't have time anymore to do it between work and family. So I would probably say under different circumstances, I would be a player rather than a deck builder. I'm okay to just net deck everything. It's fine. You know, just play the best deck in the format. But, you know, I do get the way that I get to interact with Star Wars CCG anymore really is collecting and deck building. So
yeah, so for me, I really enjoy the collecting aspect, and you know that's something that I never would have thought I would enjoy. But I just having the cube one and then a couple thematic decks, like I just built a Gungan meme deck. It's, you know, just like fight over the battle planes on Naboo, and it was a fun little Saturday. We had a little play group here in DC, and I think that if you want to build a play group, this is just general advice for folks thinking like, how can I get more people interested? Reduce the barriers to entry, right? Make it easy to play, make it familiar, make it battling on Hoth or you know, raiding Naboo or whatever it is. Make it easy for folks to pick up the game and play. And I think that's one of the big advantages of the cube is it does make it easy to play because of the draft.
Sure. You know, one person needs to have the cards basically. And 7 other people can just show up and play.
Yep.
You don't really have to worry about changing metas or what's going on with this type of deck versus that type of deck.
Yeah, like this
A
weird
lot of that
interaction that's going to
is
happen. Yeah.
you just show up and play, and so, I mean, limit it, or we'll say cube eliminates basically 99% of most people's barrier to entry to play the game, which, is definitely good if you just are like, have a group of people who game, this week you're playing Gloomhaven, next week you're playing, some other game, and, board switch it up between board games, card games, all sorts of different games, role-playing games, etc. You can just roll out your cube and everybody's playing it. So
Yeah, I think that Star Wars is just such an intricate and complex game that, unlike Magic, I can go 5 months without playing Magic, and then I can always just pick it up and figure out the, it's easy to remember because it's rather intuitive. Star Wars, because, I have friends, we played 6 months ago, and let's do the cube thing again. They're like, how do we play? We completely forgot because these concepts are just kind of unique to the game.
Yeah. Star Wars definitely has a very high threshold of needing to know really intricate knowledge of like a lot of things. Like, what is the location deployment for Tatooine? And it
Yeah.
matters because the way you can move around the planet and stuff is extremely granular. So
Yeah.
that's not always really conducive to teaching new players. You just want to play in battle. And with a cube, you can design it to eliminate a lot of that stuff. And I think that that's a really important step, is, being able to develop something that people are just going to be able to sit down and, with very limited explanation, draft and play.
So, Andy, we're approaching 40 minutes. I can't believe we've already been talking this long. I kind of want to give you a couple minutes for closing thoughts. If anybody has made it to this point, thank you for listening to us, gab on about this. But, any kind of closing thoughts on this, or, anything you want to tell people?
I think for me personally, I played probably most CCGs under the sun since the 90s through till today. And I would say that games that have strong limited play tend to last longer and have a lot more replayability. Star Wars is unfortunate in that it came out at a time before limited was really a thing. And by the time, I guess Wizards of the Coast kind of figured limited out, Star Wars was already pretty much ending. So, I'd really encourage people to explore Cube. There's a ton of resources, both on the Star Wars PC forums, as well as, go out to Magic content and read about cubing and drafting, and you can apply the lessons from those types of articles to Star Wars. There's a lot of transferable, information that I think goes a long way towards cube construction, and really just give it a try. I think it's, if people actually try playing cube and can get through doing 2 drafts of light side, dark side, or, one draft of everything together, and actually sit down and play, it's the best parts of constructed Star Wars without like the worst parts of it, we'll say.
The abusive strategies.
But
Yeah.
it's basically like, for me, it's really pure Star Wars CCG. And kind of, you alluded to it earlier when you were explaining your history, where it was like you were a kid getting beat up by college kids and people who had real jobs in the 90s who could afford $60 Darth Vaders that you would never be able to pull out of a pack if you tried.
They could afford like 8 of them, right?
And it kind of gives you a little bit of that sense of power level where like there's not just everybody has access to every card, and you kind of have to make do with what you've drafted. And I think that's kind of the hallmark of limited play.
I think it also just thematically goes well with Star Wars. I mean, the entire idea of this winnowing life force where you're making decisions based on, what you're going to put in your lost pile, that card's gone. I think thematically, to me, it just matches up well with what drafting inherently is, right? Like you're also making strategic decisions about like what synergies you're going to try to utilize. I was talking with my buddy. We play a lot of Star Wars last weekend, and if Decipher hadn't lost the license, and they probably would have done just a second edition of Star Wars, and I think they would have cleaned up a lot of the things that we're describing as far as the obstacles, and it probably would have been a better limited play option, because I think that was the direction things were going. And they did a second edition for Star Trek. So anyways, that's all just speculation, but it's fun to think about an alternative history.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, if anybody who made it this far into your video wants to talk cube or needs more information about cubes, I'm on pretty much every single social media. I'm very quick to respond to messages, and I could probably talk about cubing for another 4 hours. So
yeah, you're not super far away, so maybe someday we'll get together and actually play one of the 5 cubes.
Sure.
So I like the good commander idea. All right, well, Andy, thank you so much for spending some time with me and talking about cubes, and I will talk to you later.
All right, have a good one. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.